The night begins without hurry. Beyond the hum of cities, the world exhales, and history begins to breathe again. Somewhere between dream and silence, time opens. Not with thunder, but with the soft crackle of a distant fire. You are invited to drift not forward or backward, but inward into the quiet memory of the earth. We will travel together through the ages, to the caves where Neanderthals shared warmth and breath, to the bronze ports where empires rose and fell like tides, to the disciplined hills of Macedon where unity became art, and finally to an island called Lesbos where a single voice, Sappho's, taught the world that even fragments can be eternal. Each era carries its own rhythm, a different heartbeat beneath the same sky. Listen closely, and you may hear them blend. The whisper of fire, the march of spears, the brush of ink on parchment. Tonight, there is nothing to solve, nothing to remember, only to rest within the long and patient breathing of time itself. Life and love. In Neanderthal times, the quiet beginning. The night begins with stillness, the kind that feels older than time itself. Even the wind hesitates before crossing the threshold of the cave, as if it too remembers to be quiet here. You lie beneath the heavy hide of a reindeer, your breath rising in pale clouds that twist and fade against the cold stone ceiling. Beyond the entrance, the world sleeps under miles of ice. The air smells of snow, ash, and something metallic. The clean edge of winter, sharpened by centuries. Inside, the light of the fire trembles, soft and uneven, touching the walls where soot and ochre mark the stories of seasons already forgotten. The flame hums like a living thing, never still, its glow painting your companions in gold and shadow. This is home, not built, not owned, but found. A hollow in the earth that has learned to keep you alive. Your tribe is small, scarcely more than a dozen. You know them all without words, the hunter whose breath whistles when he sleeps, the child who laughs at the crackle of embers, the elder who hums low when storms pass overhead. Names are unnecessary, recognition lives in scent, in rhythm, in the subtle language of movement. Communication happens in gestures, the tilt of a head, the shift of a shoulder, a sound shaped more by breath than voice. There is no language yet, not as the future will know it, yet meaning flows between you like water through stone. Wordless, essential, unbroken. The fire is everything. It is not just warmth, but witness. It remembers each night that came before, each small victory over cold and hunger. Someone always tends it, a hand feeding wood, a breath coaxing life back into the coals. Without it, darkness would swallow the world. Around it, life organizes itself in quiet ritual. The hunters sit nearest, their skin marked with ash. Mothers keep close to the edge of light, rocking the smallest bodies. Children chase shadows on the wall, turning them into beasts and spirits, inventing stories they do not yet have words for. The fire binds you all together, its circle the heartbeat of the night. Food arrives from the day's effort, the weight of a deer, the crack of a bone, the soft thud of marrow freed. It is shared without ceremony, passed from hand to hand. Grease glistens on fingers and no one speaks. Gratitude is older than speech. The act of giving is its own form of tenderness. A scrap of meat placed quietly beside another's knee, a pelt folded and offered to the one shivering most, a seat closer to the flame made by a single shuffle to the side. These are the gestures that build a world. Here, love is not a story told, but an instinct obeyed. The small, selfless motion that keeps another alive. Outside, the Ice Age holds its breath. Wind sweeps the plains where mammoth herds drift like moving hills of fur and muscle. Their calls echo through the valleys, deep, mournful notes that travel farther than sight. Snow falls without haste, piling against the rocks, muffling the world until even the sound of your own pulse feels enormous. The stars, bright and cold, hang low enough to touch, reflecting in the ice like distant fires of other tribes, other nights. Inside the cave, the rhythm is slower. Tools rest near the wall, stones flaked into blades that glint faintly when the fire flares. A pile of hides becomes a bed for the weary. The elder sharpens a piece of bone, shaping it into a needle thin enough to pierce reindeer skin. Someone hums a low tone, not song, not prayer, just a vibration that keeps the silence from becoming too large. The smoke curls upward, painting the air in pale rings that fade into the ceiling's darkness. Sleep approaches like mist, slow and inevitable. Bodies drift toward one another, the edges of separate lives blurring into shared warmth. Two figures settle side by side. Their hands meet not out of desire, but of understanding, that the night is long and the cold does not forgive solitude. They breathe together, their ribs rising and falling in quiet harmony. To lie close is not romance, it is endurance, an act as sacred as fire-keeping. Still within that necessity something tender stirs, a flicker of gentleness so subtle that no one names it, yet everyone feels its truth. It is the beginning of care, the soft root from which love will one day grow. The cave listens. Every sound has its place, the pop of sap inside the wood, the sigh of snow sliding from the roof, the faint murmur of someone dreaming. No noise intrudes. Even the earth seems to respect the silence of survival. In this age, peace is not the absence of conflict, but the steady continuation of breath. Each inhale a promise, each exhale a surrender. The balance between them is the first rhythm humanity ever learned. Beyond the entrance, the world expands into darkness, valleys, rivers, and frozen plains stretching without boundary. No map records it, no story claims it. Yet you know it by feel. The slope of the hill, the scent of pine, the direction of wind against your face. Memory lives in the body. Knowledge is muscle, not language. Each movement, the striking of flint, the splitting of bone, the slow turning of meat above the flame, is both labor and prayer. You do these things not to change the world, but to remain within it. The night deepens, the fire shrinks, collapsing into a bed of glowing coal. Red light pulses against the cave wall like a beating heart. Outside, wolves call across the plain, their voices braided with distance and hunger. No one stirs. The tribe sleeps in the warm shadow of endurance, wrapped in furs and faith. Tomorrow will come as it always does, without warning, without promise, with the quiet certainty of snow falling on stone. This is the rhythm before history, before language, before memory itself. It moves at the pace of breath, patient and circular. Each inhale carries the scent of smoke and survival. Each exhale joins the long sigh of the earth, turning beneath the stars. Nothing more is needed. Nothing more is lost, and in that vast simplicity, under the soft weight of sleep, humankind begins again. The coming of others. Seasons turn and time folds into itself. The snow melts and freezes again, year after year, until the pattern of winter and thaw becomes the slow heartbeat of the earth. Herds pass across the plains, the sky leans heavy with clouds, and the tribe endures as it always has. Through habit, through patience, through the quiet trust that tomorrow will look like yesterday. Then one night beneath a dim red dawn, the rhythm changes. Shapes appear at the edge of the valley, distant at first, then closer, clear, unmistakably different. They are like you, yet not. Their limbs are longer, their faces smoother, their voices lighter. In the glow of their fires, their eyes shine with something unfamiliar. Awareness of themselves. These are the newcomers, Homo sapiens, and they carry with them the first true scent of change. They move with intention. Where Neanderthal fires sputter and smoke, theirs burn bright and clean. Their tools glint with sharper edges, shaped with precision rather than instinct. They speak with sounds that rise and fall in patterns, not the scattered calls of warning or need, but something almost melodic. When they gather, their gestures seem to dance in rhythm with their words, the meaning unfolding like ripples on water. Around their necks hang beads of bone and shell. In their hair, feathers catch the firelight. On the walls of their shelters, red ochre spreads into lines and spirals. The first art, the first attempt to hold a moment still. Watching from the darkness, you feel the strange weight of curiosity pressing into your chest. It begins as wonder, but grows into something heavier. The Neanderthals have never measured themselves against another. Strength, endurance, and familiarity were enough. Now, confronted with faces smoother and movements more graceful, they sense a distance that cannot be crossed by firelight alone. Pride falters, the old certainty trembles, jealousy takes shape, not as anger, but as ache, the awareness of difference, the quiet realization of being seen and found lesser. Yet within that discomfort lives fascination. They imitate the newcomers' motions, trace their sounds in the air, try to understand the strange order behind them. Something shifts within the mind, an awakening that has no word, only feeling. The first meetings happen without plan. Across rivers, in hunting grounds, near waterholes, glances are exchanged, cautious and long, a shared meal, a traded skin, a gesture of truce. For a while there is tension, but hunger softens hostility. Some tribes mix, finding in one another what neither possessed alone. Others fight, defending land, food, and fire. Still others watch from the edges, learning silently. The contact is messy, human, and inevitable. The Neanderthals bring strength, skill, and memory of the land. The Homo sapiens bring language, color, and the restless urge to create. Between them, the world tilts towards something new. Years pass, uncounted. The border between the two peoples begins to blur. They share more than territory now, they share the pulse of life itself. Children are born whose eyes seem to hold both past and future, whose faces bear traces of each world. In their laughter, the two species finally meet without boundary. The strong arms of one, the nimble hands of the other. Together they craft tools more precise, fires more enduring, shelters more lasting. What was once foreign becomes familiar. The mingling of blood becomes the quiet engine of evolution. Yet not all unions bring peace. There are places where the old kind retreat, weary of change, drawn to the solitude of forests and mountains. Their numbers dwindle. Hunting grows harder, winters stretch longer. One by one, the fires vanish from the caves where they once burned. Still they endure for a time, moving farther from the plains where the newcomers thrive. Their days grow quieter, their songs, if they ever had songs, fade into the hum of wind through stone. It is not extinction that takes them first, but exhaustion. Even as their bodies disappear from the earth, something invisible remains. Within the merging of tribes, within each joining of flesh and breath, a trace survives. A code, a whisper, written into the spiral of life itself. Generations later, that whisper still hums inside the blood of those who followed. It does not speak, but it remembers. In the curve of a hand, the slope of a brow, the quiet endurance of a winter night, the old world endures. Science will one day call it inheritance, 2% of modern humanity carrying the Neanderthal within. But for now, it is simply presence, the way a spark continues to glow long after the fire has gone out. Strength, resilience, the instinct to keep moving when the cold becomes unbearable. These are not stories passed down through words. They are instincts pressed into bone. If you listen closely beneath your own heartbeat, you might hear theirs. A faint rhythm of breathing that once filled the same caves, watched the same constellations, feared the same dark. It is a memory without thought, a pulse carried forward through time. The Neanderthal does not vanish, it transforms, diffusing into the species that will one day call itself human. And so the night of their ending becomes the dawn of us. The fire that once flickered in their caves now burns behind our eyes, shaping our dreams, guiding our hands, reminding us, without language, without need, that survival and tenderness are the same thing. The past does not die, it settles into silence, waiting to be remembered. And somewhere beneath the layers of skin and centuries, the first people still breathe, calm and unbroken, in the warm rhythm of our sleep. The quiet legacy. Long after the final breath of the Neanderthal dissolves into wind, the world begins to soften. The ice withdraws, slow and reluctant, uncovering rivers that remember their courses and valleys that taste sunlight for the first time in centuries. Grass returns, tender and green. The air warms with the scent of thawing earth. Across the continents, the rhythm of life changes again. Forests spread where glaciers once slept. Animals move north, following the retreating cold. In the open spaces left behind, a new humankind begins to build, unaware that the ground beneath their feet still holds the ashes of 1,000 forgotten fires. They build houses now, not caves. They carve symbols on stone, and their words begin to take shape in clay. But beneath every invention, beneath every prayer and every tool, something older lingers, the memory of warmth shared against darkness. The first fire has not vanished, it simply burns smaller inside the chest of every descendant. It glows whenever hands reach for one another in silence, whenever a stranger is fed, whenever a child is gathered into safety. These gestures, quiet and instinctive, are the true inheritance of those who came before. They built no pyramids, they wrote no poems, yet the pattern of their lives became the foundation for all that followed. From them came endurance, the strength to wait through winter, to rebuild after loss, to trust the dawn will return. From them came generosity, the reflex to divide what little you have, the grace of shared shelter. And from them came tenderness, the quiet art of staying near another heartbeat through the longest night. In every flicker of compassion, in every unspoken kindness, their presence still burns like an ember that refuses to die. Somewhere within you lies a shadow of that ancient cave, It is small, hidden beneath layers of time, but it waits patiently. When you pause before sleep, when you draw the blanket closer, when your breath slows and deepens, you return to it without knowing. You can almost feel the coarse hide beneath your fingers, smell the smoke clinging to stone, hear the steady crackle of a fire that once kept an entire world alive. In that moment, you are not separate from them. You are the continuation of their silence, their hope, their stubborn will to see another dawn. The story of the Neanderthals is often told as ending, yet endings are only changes in rhythm. They did not vanish, they transformed. Their faces have faded, but their essence threads through every gesture of survival. When you shiver and seek warmth, when you share your food without thought, when you reach for another hand in the dark, you are repeating the oldest ritual of all. Those motions, simple and wordless, are their true monuments, more lasting than stone or crown. History remembers empires and monuments, but beneath all noise lies a quieter truth. The first humans did not rule the earth, they endured it. They did not seek to dominate, but to belong. They learned the pace of seasons, the patience of fire, the honesty of effort. They taught by example what later generations would forget and rediscover, that living is not conquest but balance, and that the smallest act of care can echo longer than the mightiest act of power. Imagine the world as it was then. No walls, no borders, only the slow breathing of wind across plains. The same stars that now burn above your window once glimmered on the frozen lakes they crossed. Their reflections watched over the same constellations of fear and wonder that still live behind your eyes. Time folds easily when you see this way. The present touching the past. The heartbeat of now aligning with the heartbeat of the first human who learned to love the sound of fire. As night deepens, the cave fades from view. The walls dissolve into darkness. The flame shrinks to a single pulse of light. What was once smoke becomes the haze of dream. The cold air of the Ice Age melts into the quiet of your own room, and the faint crackle of ancient wood becomes the whisper of your breath. You drift not backward, not forward, but inward, toward that shared memory written in every cell of your being. The warmth you feel is not new. It is borrowed from every fire that ever burned, carried through the long corridor of time to rest for a moment in you. Outside, the world continues to turn beneath a calm sky. Clouds glide where glaciers once groaned. Oceans murmur over buried bones, their rhythm unchanged. The earth remembers everything but speaks softly, as though afraid to wake what sleeps. Inside, you float between thought and stillness, your pulse slowing to match the pace of ancient hearts. The distance between ages collapses until there is only this: breath, warmth, endurance. Sleep comes quietly, as it did for them. It arrives not as escape, but as return, the gentle closing of eyes that have seen enough for one lifetime. The world outside drifts away. Inside you remain, ancient and human, bound by the same simple truth that has guided every generation before you, that life is fragile, and yet it endures. The fire may fade, but the heat never leaves. It waits, patient and eternal, inside the body, inside the memory, inside the long dream of humankind. And as you drift deeper into that dream, the first fire burns once more, steady, unseen, alive within you. The warmth that saved them saves you still. The silence that sheltered them now cradles your rest. The story does not end, it exhales. Time loosens its grip. The world grows kind again. You breathe, you sleep, and the earth, ancient and gentle, breathes with you. The fall of the Bronze Age and the rise of the Sea Peoples, the shimmering age of bronze. Time drifts forward, and the long cold of the Ice Age releases its hold on the Earth. The air warms and smells of wet soil and salt. Rivers loosen their frozen jaws, and the sea, once distant and quiet, begins to breathe again. Across the vast blue of the Mediterranean, light collects on the horizon like sparks returning to a flame. Kingdoms awaken one by one, rising from shorelines and valleys until the water is ringed with human sound. In Egypt, stone temples lift from the desert, their walls painted with suns and gods, every color meant to hold the sky in place. In Anatolia, the Hittites shape metal into power. Bronze spears, bronze wheels, bronze crowns that catch the dawn. To the west, the citadels of Mycenae shine with gold hammered thin as leaves, each palace a mirror of ambition. And farther east, in Canaan, merchants measure grain and oil beneath open sky, their scales balance between trust and profit. The sea links them all, patient and glittering, a road of salt where tin from the north meets copper from the south to become the alloy of an age. Bronze, warm as honey, hard as resolve, the chosen metal of a world that believes itself eternal. This world hums with balance, a balance so complete it feels divine. Ships move steadily between ports, their hulls heavy with amphorae of wine, ivory, lapis, and stories. Desert caravans crawl like patient insects from oasis to oasis, bearing letters pressed into clay, words for kings and queens who will never meet yet depend on one another for peace. In the palaces, scribes copy trade agreements in careful script. In workshops, artisans bend fire to will. In temples, priests watch the stars to time the harvest. The air everywhere vibrates with certainty. At night, when the winds settle, fires glow along the coastlines, each flame a small echo of the constellations above. From the deck of any ship, one can look out and see civilization itself reflected on the surface of the water. There is order here, fragile yet magnificent, a structure of promises binding nations together like the weave of a golden net. But balance, by nature, is a breath held too long. The rains begin to wander from their paths. Seasons hesitate, then forget their sequence. Rivers thin until their beds glint dry in the sun. The soil hardens. The air grows brittle, metallic, tense. In the north, forests shrink, their stumps bleaching under a relentless sky. In the south, locusts rise in veils, turning day to dusk as they move across the plains. Earthquakes shudder through the hills, mountains tremble, stone walls lose their precision. Cities that once stood proud begin to crack at their corners. Temples tilt, storage jars split open, granaries empty. What was abundance becomes ache. Hunger begins quietly, like a whisper behind the ear, but soon it speaks in every marketplace, every home. It becomes the background music of the age. Messengers ride out from the cities with tablets of clay, their horses thin, their faces carved with dust. The messages are simple, almost childlike in their desperation. We are starving, send grain, our enemies are near. But the roads they travel crumble beneath them, and many never arrive. On the sea, pirates and storms make passage uncertain. Trade falters. The fragile web that tied the world together begins to sag. In its gaps, fear gathers. And then, at the edge of the horizon, movement. Small, dark shapes against the bright water, sails curved like the wings of giant birds. They multiply each season until the coastlines themselves seem to shift. The ships belong to strangers, wanderers, warriors, refugees. To some they are invaders, to others, families in search of ground that still gives food. But whichever name they bear, they carry change. The first ports fall almost gently, as if the world has grown too tired to resist. Markets burn, warehouses split open, smoke rises in soft grey ribbons that stretch across the sea like mourning veils. Villages vanish overnight, their names lost even before they could be written down. The trade routes, the arteries of the Bronze Age, collapse one by one. What begins as hunger becomes migration. What begins as migration becomes war. Entire peoples move at once, dragging with them their gods, their tools, their memories. It is not a single disaster, but 100 quiet endings braided together. The Hittite kings vanish first, their palaces looted, their records broken mid-sentence. The Mycenaean fortresses follow, their golden masks buried beneath rubble. In their ruins millennia later, archaeologists will find fragments of clay, letters that still whisper across time, "We are surrounded. The enemy has set fire to the gates. No one is coming." The writers of those pleas did not know that help could no longer exist. The network itself was gone. The light that once shimmered across the Mediterranean flickers and fades, each city extinguished like a candle in wind. And yet the sea remains unchanged, its rhythm is immune to sorrow. Waves continue their steady conversation with the shore, patient as breathing. The wind moves east to west and back again, carrying fragments of song, the echo of axes, the sigh of collapse. In its depth, fish glide above the wrecks of ships once laden with trade goods. Bronze statues lie face down on the seabed, their eyes open but unseeing. The water folds around them, calm, forgiving. The sea, indifferent, becomes the keeper of all that is lost. Still within that vast silence, something small begins to stir. From ruin grows adaptation. People gather in smaller groups, learning again how to live without the luxury of empire. Farmers return to fields instead of palaces. Craftsmen build with iron, harder and cheaper than bronze. The world becomes leaner, simpler, closer to the ground. Out of disaster comes the possibility of beginning again, and history, which never truly sleeps, turns quietly in its bed. By the time the last of the old kingdoms fade, dawn has changed color. The glow of bronze has dimmed to the gray of iron, and though the world seems diminished, it is alive. The sea that once connected all things now separates them, but its surface still shines when the sun climbs over it. From every shore the same wind blows, carrying the memory of what was. The laughter of markets, the ring of hammers, the calm of ships in harbor. The Bronze Age ends not with thunder, but with a sigh, leaving behind the faint shimmer of lessons learned too late. In its fading light, humanity pauses, breathes, and prepares unknowingly for the next chapter. Bottom of form. The sea peoples and the silent turning of the world. The year is uncertain. The memory of calendars has already thinned, like ink washed from clay. What remains are traces, ships carved into temple walls, lists of strange names half remembered by scribes who wrote with trembling hands, afraid that forgetting might erase the world itself. They called them the sea peoples, wanderers, warriors, families, and exiles moving together like tides. Their origins are scattered across islands, peninsulas, and coasts now blurred by time. Some came from the Aegean, some from the far west, others from places that no longer exist. They travel not only with spears and oars, but with carts, oxen, children, and the memory of homes swallowed by hunger. To one empire they are raiders, to another refugees. But beneath both names beats the same truth. They are survivors of a world collapsing behind them. They move where the land meets the sea, following shorelines like veins of opportunity. The cities they approach once glowed with trade and laughter, but now their harbors are hungry. The merchants who once weighed copper and wine listen instead to the crash of shields, the shouts of battle carried on the wind. Fire spreads along the docks, its reflection trembles on the black water like broken moons. Sails burn and fall into the sea. Stone statues topple into the surf, their faces swallowed by foam. The Bronze Age, so proud in its craft and order, cannot hold against hunger and motion. For every fortress that falls, another group of displaced families takes up the journey, each carrying fragments of the old world in woven baskets and memory. There is no single war, only a vast unraveling, threads of desperation pulled loose from every edge of the map. In palaces far inland, rulers debate the meaning of this movement. They call councils, send envoys, draft messages of peace or threat, but no one can stop a tide. Each season more ships appear on the horizon, their prows carved into shapes of beasts, their sails swelling like lungs. The old order fractures under its own weight until even the victors cannot remember what victory means. By the time scribes scratch the last entries into their tablets, history has already slipped beneath the waves. The world is learning painfully that nothing made by man can remain still forever. Far to the south, the great kingdom of Egypt watches the horizon darken. It is the last lamp burning at the edge of a storm. Pharaoh Ramses III gathers his armies along the delta, the marshes thick with reeds that whisper under the wind. The Nile widens before them, calm and deceptive, its surface reflecting both sun and fear. Along the bank stand rows of soldiers, shields gleaming, spears pointed upward like a forest of metal. The air trembles with waiting. Out beyond the mouth of the river, dark sails bloom one after another. The sea peoples have come, not in stealth, but in need. And as the first arrows arc through the air, history holds its breath. Later, on the walls of Medinet Habu, the story will be carved in silence. There will be no lines of poetry, no written cries, only images, ships locked together, oars splintering, the sky thick with arrows, the sea boiling with bodies. Warriors tumble into the water while others climb over the dead to strike again. Drums and screams dissolve into the endless rhythm of waves. When it ends, silence covers the delta like mist. Egypt remains standing but changed. Its power drains away, slow as the tide, leaving the shore. What was once triumph becomes fatigue. The empire folds inward, smaller, older, guarding its light as though the wind itself were now the enemy. The sea peoples scatter like seeds. Some vanish into deserts where no one follows. Others find coasts that still hold promise. In Canaan, they rebuild on land made soft by ash, naming their new cities Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod. Places that will outlive even the memory of who first built them. Across the Western Sea in Sardinia and Sicily, their descendants plant grain in soil darkened by the fires of the old age. They forge new tools from iron, rough but enduring. The smoke of conquest thins, and what follows is quieter. Small villages, fewer gods, shorter songs. The world, once bright with trade and ornament, exhales and closes its eyes. But this closing is not death. It is pause, the moment between two breaths. The Iron Age rises slowly, practical and unadorned. Trade returns in smaller circles. Writing fades for a time, then reappears in simpler marks. People learn to live closer to the earth again, to value strength over shine. No one names this renewal yet. It arrives like dawn seen through fog. Somewhere, a blacksmith hammers the first true iron blade, and with each strike, the Bronze Age slips further into memory. The lesson, though unspoken, is clear. Empires are not eternal. Even the strongest must someday bend to hunger, wind, and the movement of those who have nothing left to lose. The sea witnesses all without judgment. It keeps no lists, only rhythm. Its waves wash over wrecked harbors and forgotten coasts, polishing bronze into green stone, turning swords into coral. In the islands where children now play, bits of pottery glint in the sand, the remains of ships, of cities, of hands that once built too much. The children do not know the names of the kings who ruled here, nor the merchants who once counted copper by the ton. They only know the smell of salt, the hum of the wind, and the peace that follows after too much noise. To them, the sea is not history, but home. Night gathers over the Mediterranean, slow and vast. The stars return one by one, the same lights that watched the first ships rise and the last ships fall. They cast a pale path across the water, and for a moment the sea glows, not with flame, but with memory. Beneath the surface lie the bones of empires, the anchors of forgotten fleets, the jars of merchants who never made it home. All rest in the same calm darkness. The sea keeps its record differently, not in stone, but in motion, not in words, but in patience. Every wave is a page rewritten by the wind, and so the world turns, smaller now, but more awake. The age of bronze dreams beneath the tide, its shimmer dimmed but not gone. In the quiet above, the air is new again. The earth, having exhaled, prepares to breathe once more. From the ruins of kings and cities rise the soft sounds of beginnings. A hammer striking iron, a voice teaching a child, a fire rekindled after storm. The sea listens, eternal and indifferent, its endless rhythm guiding the planet into another dawn. The rise of Macedon and the culture of discipline. The stone and the spear. The sound of the sea fades into memory. In its place comes the slow, deliberate echo of marching feet, the measured rhythm of purpose replacing the randomness of tide. The horizon changes color. The light sharpens against mountains that rise like the backs of sleeping beasts. You stand before Macedon, a land rough and unpolished, carved by wind and will. The soil is thin, the winters long, the rivers narrow and restless. It is not a place for comfort, but for shaping endurance. Between the southern brightness of Athens and the austere silence of Sparta, this territory breathes its own kind of pride, quiet, hard, self-sufficient. Its people live close to the edge of survival, and from that edge they learn the language of strength. Here, necessity becomes discipline. The land teaches in silence. Hunger makes precision. Cold makes order. The body learns to move efficiently, to waste nothing, to trust the small things that last, the curve of a tool, the rhythm of breathing, the distance between footsteps. In this world of sparse abundance, luxury lies in control. To lose rhythm is to lose life. And so the people of Macedon grow into the earth like the pines that line its ridges, their roots deep, their posture unbending, their patience long. It is in this stillness that Philip is born. He grows watching the contrast between his own land and the soft splendor of those who look down on it. He sees that power has changed. The age of walls and speeches is fading. The age of movement has begun. He understands that to endure is not enough. One must learn to move together. His kingdom is not built of marble or myth, but of men who learn the discipline of motion. Each farmer, each noble, each shepherd is called to stand shoulder to shoulder, to lift the same weapon, to breathe the same breath. From this vision comes the phalanx, a living wall of men holding spears 6 meters long, their bronze points glinting like frozen sunlight. When they march, the ground hums with the sound of unity. When they stop, silence gathers like snowfall. Philip trains them without pause. The mountains become classrooms, the valleys become drill fields. They march in heat and frost, eat in the dirt, sleep in the same dust. They learn that the space between them is sacred, that one man's weakness endangers all. No gesture is wasted. The act of lifting a spear becomes both labor and meditation. Discipline replaces glory. Patience replaces passion. What begins as training becomes transformation. The rough strength of shepherds refined into the still grace of soldiers. The army becomes not an instrument of conquest, but a living philosophy. Their armor grows lighter, their stride becomes a rhythm the land itself seems to recognize. Shields overlap, catching the light in a single gleam. Spears tilt forward in perfect unison, forming a forest of points that moves like the breath of a single creature. From afar they no longer appear as men, but as one entity, an organism made of iron and intent. The lesson is simple, yet eternal. Unity is strength, and strength is survival. Macedon, once scattered and overlooked, begins to hum with purpose. When Philip rides among his men, he does not promise glory. He speaks instead of balance. He tells them that order, not victory, will outlast them. That precision is its own kind of peace. His words are plain, but his presence carries the weight of the world he imagines. The soldiers listen because they have lived through chaos, and in his rhythm they find calm. The idea of Macedon begins to change. Villages turn into outposts of training. Fields are ploughed in time with the beat of marching. Boys grow into soldiers who see no difference between labor and battle. Both require endurance, both demand harmony. The transformation is slow and quiet, like iron cooling into strength. The old rivalries fade, replaced by the shared breath of men who know what it means to depend entirely on another. In their eyes burns something new. Not the hunger for conquest, but the satisfaction of precision. To move in perfect formation, to strike as one, to hold the line without thought. This becomes their prayer, their art, their proof that chaos can be conquered through rhythm. Far away, in Athens, philosophers gather to debate virtue and truth. In Thebes, poets compose songs of longing and beauty. But here, in the mountains, the beat of boots against earth becomes its own philosophy, a meditation in motion. The lessons of words and ideals are replaced by the lessons of silence and repetition. The Macedonians understand that thought can live in movement, that wisdom can grow from routine. Each synchronized step becomes a declaration. The world can be shaped through patience. Evenings fall quietly over the camp. Fires burn low. The smell of leather, metal, and dust mingles with pine. Men sit sharpening their blades, not for battle, but for readiness. The stars above them watch without judgment. They speak little, their silence deeper than the night. To outsiders, it might look like weariness. To them, it is peace, the peace of alignment, the serenity of knowing one's purpose. They are not waiting for war, they are becoming something more disciplined than war itself. In the morning, when they rise, the sun touches the edges of their spears and turns them into rivers of light. The army stirs like one body awakening. Their shadows stretch long across the plain. From the cliffs, their lines look endless, the geometry of intention drawn across the land. The first empire of motion begins not in chaos or triumph, but in silence and dust, in 1,000 footsteps, moving at the same pace toward an unseen horizon. Macedon, shaped by hunger and refined by discipline, is ready to step into history. And beneath it all, the rhythm continues, steady, soft, and eternal. The rhythm of endurance, the rhythm of the human will learning to move together. The same pulse that once beat in the caves of Neanderthals now beats in the hearts of soldiers, in time with the land itself. Macedon breathes in, the world holds still, and the age of the spear begins. The March of Unity. Time passes softly, like wind moving through tall grass. Seasons fold one into another until even memory begins to lose its edges. The father is gone and the son stands where he once stood. Alexander inherits not only a throne but a thought, that unity can stretch across mountains, rivers, and belief. He studies the lessons of Philip as one studies a sacred rhythm, repeating them until they no longer require thought. What begins as discipline becomes instinct. Around him gathers an army that has never known defeat, men shaped by years of synchronized breath and movement. They do not dream of empire, they dream of alignment. Each man thinks only of the next command, the next step, the next heartbeat that must match his brother's. At dawn, the journey begins. The horizon glows the color of ash, pale and endless. The army moves through mist that smells of iron and damp grass. Rivers are crossed without hesitation, deserts are endured without complaint. The sun rises and sets upon their armor until bronze fades to dull brown, until dust settles permanently into skin. They sleep little, eat less, and march with a steadiness that defies exhaustion. In battle, they are not a collection of men, but a single intention made flesh. The phalanx anchors the world, its long spears forming a barrier against chaos. Behind that living wall waits the cavalry, the king's companions, restless, poised, listening for the smallest gesture. When Alexander lifts his hand, thunder rolls, the riders surge forward, a blade of motion cutting the enemy's flank. Each campaign is another heartbeat, each victory another breath, and so the rhythm continues, Greece, Persia, Egypt, beyond the Indus, or the world unfolding under the measured cadence of a single will. The empire expands not through chance, but through geometry. Every movement has proportion, every maneuver a quiet symmetry. Macedonian warfare is more than strategy. It is culture set to rhythm. Every farmer, every noble, every soldier keeps the same pulse: train, fight, honor the king. They share food, pain, and shelter. They mend one another's wounds without question. Worth is not spoken, but proven in endurance. Each step forward is an offering, each battle a ceremony of precision. The field of war becomes a monastery without walls, a place where silence and coordination serve as prayer. The sound of boots on soil replaces chanting, the glint of spear points replaces flame. Discipline becomes devotion. The army, moving as one, is a moving temple to order itself. Alexander watches the world unfold before him like a vast scroll of light. Cities glitter in the distance, rivers shimmer and divide, mountains whisper names he will never know. Every conquest reveals something larger than himself, yet within him the rhythm remains unbroken. He measures his own heartbeat against the steady drum of his marching men. At night, he lies beneath strange skies and listens to their breathing, the collective sigh of thousands at rest. When he dreams, it is not of crowns or statues, but of footsteps, endless, patient, and perfectly timed. Unity, for him, is the only immortality worth seeking. Years slide by unnoticed. Victories gather like layers of dust upon bronze. The men age, their beards silvering, their armor wearing thin, but the pattern holds. The rhythm of Macedon endures long after fatigue should have broken it. New recruits join, learning the old discipline as if it were inherited. Their voices blend seamlessly into the ancient chant of motion and order. No one remembers when the marching began. No one imagines it could end. The empire is no longer expansion, but it is continuation, an echo of the same perfect gesture repeated across continents. Wherever they go, they build not monuments, but roads, the veins through which civilization will later move. They leave behind languages of measurement, of clarity, of command. Cities rise where the army once camped, their streets aligned to the logic of marching feet. The mark of Macedon is not destruction, but cohesion. The understanding that chaos can be subdued by rhythm, that endurance can outlast brilliance. This becomes their true gift to the world. Not gold, not empire, but the idea that motion, governed by harmony, can shape destiny. At the height of his power, Alexander stands at the edge of maps, staring into landscapes no Greek has ever seen. The wind from the east tastes of unknown spices. The constellations above him look rearranged. He feels the weight of the world behind him, the steady heartbeat of men who have followed too far to turn back. They ask for no speeches. Their faith is practical. They trust the next step. And in that trust lies a quiet holiness. Even at the borders of comprehension, the rhythm continues, 1,000 feet pressing order into an unmeasured world. As they march, the line between home and distance dissolves. They no longer belong to Macedon or to any land. They belong to the march itself. The world bends slightly under their steps, and time seems to slow, uncertain whether to move forward or pause in reverence. The soldiers no longer speak of victory, they speak of balance, of holding formation against the unknown. Behind them, the lands they conquered grow still, not in ruin, but in completion, as though every place has given what it was meant to give. The silence that follows their passing is not grief. It is gratitude. When the pace finally falters, it does so not from defeat, but from fulfillment. The pattern has reached its natural end. The rhythm that began in the cold hills of Macedon has circled the earth and come home. Alexander looks back and sees that his father's lesson has become the shape of the world. Unity, once discipline, has become legend. The same line of motion that began with a few hundred men now spans continents, roads, and centuries. It moves invisibly through time, teaching every empire that follows that power is rhythm, and rhythm is peace. The dust of the march settles slowly. The sound of feet fades into the hum of wind across distant plains. In that hush, the air feels different, cleansed, patient, aware of what it has carried. The soldiers lay down their weapons. The earth, pressed by their steps, remembers the shape of their order. For a moment, the world stands still, balanced perfectly between exhaustion and grace. Then the silence deepens, wide and endless, waiting for another age to learn the lesson again, that the most lasting strength is not in conquest, but in moving together, breath by breath, until motion itself becomes peace. The enduring discipline. When Alexander's light begins to fade, the empire does not collapse. It divides like a living cell, each fragment carrying within it the pattern of the whole. The great circle he once traced across continents continues to spin in quieter revolutions. His generals, men who once marched beside him, men who knew his breath and the cadence of his orders, carve the world into portions. Each region becomes its own reflection of the same design. In Egypt, in Syria, in the broad plains of Asia, the echo of the phalanx endures, the same alignment of shields, the same slow discipline of movement, the same trust that binds one man to another more tightly than any oath written in stone. Even beneath foreign suns, the sarissa glitters. Even in new tongues, the command travels down the ranks like a whispered thought, old as breath and steady as dawn. The years lengthen. Empires shift their borders, yet the idea remains. In faraway Rome, the watchers take notes. They study the geometry of order, the precision of ranks, the calm logic that allows a small nation to move mountains. Centuries later, Roman legions will march in near-perfect lines, their shields locking with the same deliberate grace. They will not call it imitation, they will call it evolution. Future powers, too, Parthians, Byzantines, generals of distant continents, will look back to Macedon, seeking the secret that turned hardship into harmony. But the truth cannot be copied, it can only be lived. The power of Macedon was never in the weapon or the wall of spears, it was in the will. The quiet, invisible agreement that each life belonged to something larger than itself, that the rhythm of many could become the strength of one. When the campaigns finally end, the soldiers return to the hills of their birth. The same roads they once paved with footsteps now bloom with grass. The noise of war softens into the hum of bees, the rustle of grain. Fields grow again where battle once raged. Children chase each other across plains once measured by phalanxes. They find broken spearheads in the dirt and turn them into toys, unaware that their laughter is the harvest of discipline. The old men watch from doorways, their backs bent, but their gaze steady, and they understand that order survives even in rest. Macedon fades into legend, yet its breath lingers wherever patience outweighs impulse. That legacy travels quietly. It survives not in monuments, but in gestures. The builder who measures twice before he cuts stone, the craftsman who repeats a movement until the motion itself becomes knowledge, the musician who practices until the sound dissolves into silence. Each act of precision is a small resurrection of that ancient rhythm. The phalanx lives not in the dust of battlefields, but in the patience of hands that seek alignment. The world continues because of such quiet repetitions. What began as a formation of spears becomes a philosophy of being. To move together, to trust the space beside you, to hold the line when fear whispers at the edge of thought. These lessons outlive empires. They travel through language and memory, older than kings, stronger than any law. Every age rediscovers them under new names, teamwork, craft, harmony, but the essence remains the same. Greatness is not noise or conquest, but coordination. The strength of humanity has always rested in its ability to synchronize breath, to find rhythm amid uncertainty, to build a collective balance where chaos once reigned. The last soldiers of Macedon grow old, their armor tarnishes, their banners fray. Some become farmers again, planting seed with the same deliberate rhythm they once used to plant their spears. Others teach their sons the art of stillness, how to wait before acting, how to find peace in repetition. They do not speak of empire. They speak of proportion, of the calm that comes from knowing one's place in a pattern. The world they'd leave behind is smaller, quieter, but also wiser. It understands that power unmeasured is merely noise. True power is rhythm sustained. As centuries pass, the mountains forget their names. Grass buries the ruins of training grounds. Rivers change course and wash clean the scars of conquest. The stones that once echoed with marching feet now serve as foundations for villages, gardens, and homes. Life continues in gentler cycles. Yet when the wind moves through the valleys, it carries a faint vibration, a sound too low to be music, too constant to be silence. It is the heartbeat of the old discipline, still pulsing beneath layers of soil and time. At night, when the air cools and the stars begin to shine, the land feels almost aware. The constellations remain fixed, watching as they once did when Philip dreamed of order beneath the same sky. The pattern of heaven mirrors the pattern of earth. Each star a soldier in an infinite formation, each orbit a march without end. The universe itself seems built on the same principle Macedon discovered: balance through motion, peace through structure, eternity through rhythm. Sometimes, in the deep hours before dawn, if you listen closely, you can almost hear it. The soft rhythm of boots on dust, the whisper of iron brushing air, the measured breath of men who believed that unity could outlast death. The sound is faint but constant, the murmur of history turning in its sleep. It is the memory of alignment, the echo of 1,000 hearts beating in time. It reminds us that order is not the absence of chaos, but its transformation at the moment when noise becomes pattern, when fear becomes focus, when life becomes movement shared. In that rhythm lies peace. The same peace found in the heartbeat of a listener drifting towards sleep, when every inhalation matches the next, when thought loosens and the body becomes a single, steady motion of breath. The world, for a brief and perfect instant, moves as one, balanced, quiet, enduring. And as the night deepens, the mountains fade into shadow, the stars steady themselves in their endless watch, and the rhythm, ancient and human, continues, soft, eternal, unbroken. The life and legacy of Sappho, the island and the voice. The noise of battle fades until only the breathing of the sea remains. The waves return to their patient rhythm, washing softly against the stones of an island shaped by wind and memory. This is Lesbos, a cradle of sunlight, water, and song. Morning comes gently, painted in the pale tones of pearl and smoke. The horizon glows with promise, neither bright nor dim, only balanced. Fishermen push their narrow boats from the shore, their nets trailing behind them like old dreams. Olive trees bend and whisper, their leaves flashing silver in the rising light. The air smells of salt and new fire. Somewhere inland, in a small white house wrapped in vines, a girl speaks to herself in half-formed lines. Her name is Sappho. She is young enough to wonder and wise enough to listen. The sea hums outside her window, and she repeats its rhythm under her breath, a quiet practice that will one day become poetry. Sappho's world is one that believes sound holds the soul together. Every feast begins with song, every ceremony ends in music. Men sing of war and heroes, of ships and thunder, of gods who rise and vanish like storms. In the temples, voices rise in harmony, each tone a bridge between earth and sky. Yet Sappho hears something different. Her ear catches not the song itself, but the silence around it, the space between one note and the next, the trembling pause where feeling hides. She begins to write about the small movements that others overlook, the way light falls on skin, the way a gaze lingers too long, the way the heart stumbles without warning. Her poems are short, almost weightless, but they hold the density of emotion. They drift like pollen through air, invisible yet alive, settling quietly in those who hear them. She does not seek fame, she seeks alignment between sound and breath, word and feeling. To her, poetry is not performance, it is preservation, a way of holding a moment still so that it does not vanish. Around her, the world celebrates strength and conquest, but she writes of fragility, of the courage it takes simply to feel. In doing so, she builds a temple more lasting than stone, one made of human voice and listening. Soon, others come. Young women drawn from across the islands arrive to learn from her. They bring instruments, questions, and hope. They expect lessons in meter and melody. They find instead a sanctuary of calm. In Sappho's courtyard, the air is soft with the scent of cedar, honey, and wine. Laughter ripples under the shade of fig trees. Lyres hum gently in the background, blending with the chirp of cicadas. Lessons drift into evenings, evenings into quiet conversations. Sometimes they sing, sometimes they sit in silence, watching the light fade into the sea. It is in these moments that Sappho's teaching becomes clear. Emotion is not a weakness to be hidden, but a thread to be woven with care. Feeling, like rhythm, is meant to move through us, not rule us. Her poems become acts of noticing. She writes of garlands braided into hair, of jasmine hanging in doorways, of sandals left beside beds after dancing. She writes of hands brushing by accident, of longing glimpsed and let go. Nothing grand, nothing royal, yet everything sacred. For her, the divine hides in the ordinary, waiting for attention. Each line she writes is a gesture of reverence toward the fleeting. The gods of her world may command temples, but Sappho worships the brief and the human, the blush of affection, the tremor of breath, the warmth of shared laughter before it fades. In her voice there is privacy, yet never distance. She speaks not from a mountain, but from a chair beside the hearth. The power of her words lies in their closeness, the feeling that she is whispering to one listener, not to a crowd. Through her, language becomes transparent, as if thought itself was singing. A single glance becomes a universe, a whisper becomes memory, a sigh becomes history. Those who hear her understand that art is not about size or fame, but clarity, the ability to name what the heart already knows. Days on the island pass with unhurried rhythm. The mornings fill with teaching, the afternoons with music and laughter. At night, lanterns glow in the courtyard, their flames trembling in the wind. Sappho's students gather, their faces calm, their voices blending into low harmony. Sometimes they sing verses she has written, sometimes their own. Sometimes they sit in silence, allowing the hum of the sea to complete the song. The boundary between teacher and student dissolves. What remains is communion, a circle of people breathing the same rhythm. Word of her gift travels beyond the island. Travelers carry her verses on fragments of pottery and papyrus. Sailors recite them on the decks of ships. In distant cities, her name becomes a murmur passed between scholars and singers. Yet Sappho remains where she began, near the water, where the air tastes of salt and olives, where each dawn feels like an unwritten line. Fame, to her, is only another echo. What matters is presence, the act of noticing, the art of translating the invisible into sound. Sometimes, when the nights grow long and the moon climbs high, she walks down to the shore. The sand is cool, the sea dark, but listening. She recites her lines to the waves, watching how the water holds and releases them. Each tide takes her words away, but she knows they will return in another form, perhaps in a dream, a thought, or the distant voice of another poet centuries from now. For Sappho, this is enough. The sea is both audience and mirror, eternal and kind. As dawn approaches again, the island exhales. The fishermen return, their nets heavy with silver light. The olive groves shimmer. The house in the hills fills with the murmur of waking voices. Somewhere within it, Sappho writes her first lines of the day. They are simple, careful, born of listening. A few words shaped by love, by rhythm, by peace. The island, still half asleep, listens with her. In that quiet, poetry and life are the same thing. Soft, breathing, endless. The exile and the echo. Time shifts like light upon water, bending and reforming with every passing wave. Seasons change on the island of Lesbos, and the calm that once surrounded Sappho begins to thin. Rumors drift like seeds on the wind. Whispers of politics, of shifting loyalties, of voices that fear what they cannot control. In this ancient world, art is never fully separate from power. One morning, messengers arrive. By evening, her name is spoken in judgment. The reason fades even as it is pronounced. Perhaps envy, perhaps change, perhaps the quiet unease that beauty awakens in authority. Whatever the cause, the verdict is exile. She leaves at dawn when the horizon is still pale and unformed. The sea is calm but carries the scent of distance. Her companions help her aboard a small ship bound for Sicily. As the oars dip into the water, she looks back toward the island that shaped her. The cliffs still pink with early light, the olive trees catching the breeze. She carries little. A lyre wrapped in cloth, a few scrolls, a pouch of herbs, a memory of voices singing in her courtyard. The voyage is long and salt-burned. Days stretch in silence, marked only by the creak of wood and the rhythm of waves. Yet, as the shoreline of her homeland fades, something within her remains unshaken. The rhythm she once found in the sea now lives in her pulse. Sicily rises from the water like a dark jewel. Its air smells of ash and citrus. The hills are broad and unfamiliar, yet their silence feels kind. Sappho finds a small dwelling near the harbor, white-walled, plain, but open to the wind. Exile, rather than silence her, deepens the tone of her song. The loneliness sharpens her ear, the distance clarifies her sight. At night she listens to the foreign sea and discovers that it sings in the same cadence as the Aegean. Every wave that breaks upon these rocks reminds her that the world is vast, yet bound by one rhythm. Even here, people gather. Fishermen and their wives come first, curious about the woman who plays the lyre by the water. Then scholars, traders, farmers. They find her voice soothing, the way a candle softens the corners of a dark room. She writes not of loss, but of endurance, the quiet art of remaining whole while being far away. Her verses speak of patience, of the small ache that hums beneath ordinary life, of how memory can become a kind of prayer. Those who hear her leave calmer than before. They say her songs make the air gentler, as if the heart learns to breathe more slowly while she sings. Her words spread quietly through the island. They pass from mouth to mouth, from tavern to temple. A mother hums one while rocking a child. A sailor repeats another as he watches the horizon. Her poetry finds new shapes, scratched into pottery, carved on wood, etched into wax. She never asks for this, but she does not resist it. In her mind, poetry belongs to those who need it most. She tells her listeners that love survives distance by changing form. It becomes rhythm, and rhythm is the language that crosses every sea. Letters travel back to Lesbos. Carried by merchants and travelers, her poems return to the courtyards where they were first imagined. They are sung at weddings and festivals, whispered in the quiet rooms of lovers. Some are copied by students who have never met her, written in hands that tremble slightly, as if afraid to alter even a syllable. Her fame grows, though she seeks none of it. The voice of Sappho becomes a bridge between the private and the eternal, between the brief warmth of touch and the long echo of remembrance. When she closes her eyes at night, the distance collapses. She imagines the Aegean moon hanging above her old garden, the glow touching the tops of olive leaves. She can smell the crushed figs on her fingers, hear the laughter of her students drifting through the doorway. Each poem she writes is a small return, a homecoming measured in syllables. The act of creation becomes a kind of travel, a movement inward rather than across the world. She learns that exile cannot erase belonging. It only changes its shape. In time, Sicily begins to feel less foreign. The market sounds become familiar, the voices of her neighbors settle into her days. Children follow her to the shore to listen. When she sings, even the wind seems to pause. Her words are still gentle, still precise, but beneath them runs a deeper current, acceptance, not resignation. She no longer divides the world into home and away. Everywhere there is sky, and beneath it, the same sea. As the years pass, she writes fewer lines, but each one carries the weight of calm. Her songs no longer chase beauty, they rest within it. She teaches her new friends that loss is not an ending, but a rhythm the heart learns to count. To miss something deeply is proof that it was real. To remember without sorrow is proof of growth. She has turned distance into melody, turning pain into pattern until it becomes peace. When the moon rises over Sicily, she sometimes walks to the edge of the cliffs. The sea below glows faintly, as if reflecting her own light. She hums a few notes, half song, half breath, and the sound carries out across the water. Somewhere far away on Lesbos, another listener might pause, feeling a faint tremor in the air without knowing why. The connection remains, invisible, unbroken. Sappho smiles at the thought. In exile, she has found not absence, but echo. The further she travels, the more her words resemble the sea itself, endless, reflective, and familiar to anyone who has ever missed what they love. The 10th Muse. Centuries drift by, soft as dust in afternoon light. The island of Lesbos, once alive with song, fades into the long silence of history. The stones crumble, the gardens turn to earth, and the waves that once carried Sappho's voice move on to other shores. Yet somewhere, in a library far from the sea, her words continue to breathe. Beneath the golden lamps of Alexandria, among scrolls of kings and philosophers, scholars read aloud what remains of her lines. They speak them carefully, reverently, as if afraid the sound itself might crumble. To them, she is the 10th Muse, the mortal voice elevated to divine company, a poet whose humanity became myth. The title is meant as honor, yet her work resists divinity. Her poems do not live among the stars, they remain anchored to the pulse of the human heart. They speak of glances, of hands, of breath, things that belong to the living. While philosophers debate the heavens, her words remind them of earth. Her art is not about power, but presence, not about the gods, but the quiet miracle of existing long enough to feel. Time, as it always does, becomes fire. Libraries burn, cities fall, papyrus turns to dust. The world forgets even what it meant to remember. Centuries of conquest and neglect reduce her collected songs to a scattering of fragments, a torn scrap describing a smile, a line about the coolness of grass under evening light, the first half of a stanza that never reaches its end. And still, somehow, those remnants glow. The edges may be broken, but the feeling remains intact, a gentleness that outlives completion. Scholars reading them feel something they cannot name, the sense that beauty, once born, never fully dies. What survives of her voice radiates a calm so complete that later poets reshape their own rhythms around it. In Rome, Catullus borrows her cadence, softening the Latin tongue until it can breathe like Greek. Horace learns from her restraint, finding balance between thought and silence. Through them, Sappho's voice travels forward, changing form yet keeping its essence. Each generation translates her into its own language, but none can erase the quiet pulse beneath her words. That blend of tenderness and strength that feels older than civilization itself. During the Renaissance, she returns again, painted in frescoes and carved in marble. Artists imagine her seated by the sea, lyre in hand, surrounded by a haze of golden light. Composers set her fragments to music, inventing notes to fill the missing line. To them she is both myth and memory, the spirit of creation that refuses to vanish. Her name becomes shorthand for beauty that endures, for voices once silenced that rise again. Even as the centuries turn cold with reason and noise, her gentleness survives. An undercurrent running through art, reminding the world that sensitivity is also a form of courage. In the modern age, she becomes something more, a symbol. Her legacy is claimed not by rulers or scholars, but by those who find in her words a reflection of themselves. Women who speak when told to be silent, lovers who name what others fear to name, artists who create without permission. They see in her the proof that softness is not weakness, that intimacy can shape eternity. Sappho's influence moves not like a lineage, but like a tide, steady and returning, reshaping every shore it touches. One poem survives almost whole, her hymn to Aphrodite. In it, love is not divine punishment, but gentle persuasion, a force that leads rather than demands. The goddess does not descend with thunder. She leans close and whispers, reminding mortals of tenderness, of the quiet strength hidden within desire. To read the poem is to stand beside still water, feeling it breathe against your skin. There is no fear in it, no grandeur, only recognition. The divine, Sappho seems to say, begins wherever the human heart grows kind. Scholars in every century copy her verses, their pens moving like prayers. They know that paper burns, ink fades, but repetition preserves. Through ruin, translation, and rediscovery, her words continue to flicker. Each copyist adds another link in a chain of faith, the belief that beauty deserves to live. 1,000 hands across 1,000 years keep the same flame alive. Each stroke of ink is a gesture of devotion, a refusal to let silence win. And so, even as empires rise and fall, Sappho remains. Not in monuments, but in the air between syllables. Not in temples, but in the soft breath of those who read her aloud. She exists wherever language finds its gentleness, in the quiet moment before confession, in the pause between music and memory, in the sigh that carries both longing and peace. She is no longer just a poet of Lesbos. She has become a pulse of the world itself, the soft, enduring rhythm that outlasts every empire. Her words, scattered but eternal, remind us that the smallest fragment of truth can illuminate centuries. Somewhere, a reader opens a book by lamplight. The page trembles slightly in the air. A single line whispers across time, and the world grows still, listening once more to the voice of the 10th muse. The journey ends where it began, in stillness. The fires of the Ice Age fade to embers. The bronze cities sleep beneath the sea. The phalanxes of Macedon have stopped marching, their spears rusting gently in the soil. And on the distant shore of Lesbos, Sappho's voice hums softly, its echo folded into the hush of waves. All that remains is rhythm, the same pulse that moved through hunters, builders, warriors, and poets. It has always been here, waiting beneath the noise of the world, guiding every breath. You have heard it tonight, in the crackle of ancient fires, in the slow turning of the sea, in the murmur of words older than memory. The past does not vanish, it rests within us. Every kindness you offer, every moment of quiet you create, continues that lineage. You are the descendant of endurance, the inheritor of rhythm, the living echo of those who came before. So close your eyes, let the centuries dissolve. The story has no ending, only rest. Somewhere in the distance, time hums like a low lullaby, and the world, vast and gentle, drifts once more into sleep.